This KFAN podcast is sponsored by Builders and Remodelers, exclusive Twin Cities provider of Elements Windows. Get the highest quality windows at unmatchable value. Visit buildersandremodelers.com for more details.
Hey, friend, I know how this feels. Waking up exhausted after multiple trips to the bathroom and feeling embarrassed by sudden leaks. I used to be constantly on edge, searching for a restroom whenever I was out. Then I discovered Better Woman. I was skeptical at first, but 2 months in, everything changed. I experienced improved bladder control, no more heart-stopping moments when I laugh or sneeze, less urge to go, deeper and more restful sleep. I finally felt like myself again, confident and in control. Better Woman is natural, effective, clinically tested, and trusted by women for over 25 years. Ready to take back your control? Head over to BeBetterNow.com to order your supply today. That's BeBetterNow.com. These statements have not been evaluated by the FDA. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. Use as directed. Individual results may vary.
For you to offer questions or observations for the reporter who covers the Minnesota Vikings for the Star Tribune and is a weekly contributor to this program, usually at 4:30, today a little bit later. Ben Goessling is brought to you by, as always, our very good friends at Standard Heating and Air Conditioning. 64686 is the Bradshaw and Bryant KFAN text line. If you have any Vikings schedule questions or anything else, National Football League on your mind. How are you, sir?
What was that?
I said, how are you? Are you doing okay today?
I'm doing well. You the switch went in as you were asking your question.
Yeah,
I'm doing very well.
That happens. That's okay. No problem at all. So I mentioned earlier the story, I think, breaking that the 49ers have extended. They've committed to Brock Purdy, and I'd heard somebody yesterday say, basically, you can count on the Niners getting this extension done before the season because the 49ers schedule is so forgiving this year that it'll cost them another 10 or 15 million a year because the Niners can't possibly do anything but go up, and that would mean a more expensive Brock Purdy. I'll admit I have not studied the 49ers schedule very carefully, but it's an interesting way to look at it.
It sure is. It makes me wonder if the AFC South is on the 49ers schedule this year, if the rotation goes there. I can't say I've looked at it either, but knowing what that meant for the NFC North records last year, that would not entirely shock me. I guess, yeah, I mean, you're probably saying in any of the quarterback things, doing it earlier is better because prices only go up, and waiting only means it's more expensive. But, yeah, the schedule idea is interesting because if that is in fact the case, he'll put up numbers, and they're not probably quite as well built as they've been. Certainly they got rid of some of the veterans, and they're in a little bit of a reload phase here. But, yeah, I think if the schedule is there for him to put up numbers, it's not going to hurt his asking price, that's for sure.
Guardsy confirms the Niners got the AFC South on the schedule, so boom, there it is. So that might explain a lot. Purdy is an interesting case because I've tended to try to defend him because I think some of the criticism is he's not this big strapping lad, right, with a cannon of an arm. And yet, a lot of his numbers seemed very effective. And then we would get later in the season or we get to the postseason, I go, I don't know. I mean, how far do you go to commit to him? But they're kind of stuck, are they not? Because it's the old deal of if you not him, who? And so to a certain extent, maybe you have to have enough faith in your own coaches to continue to work with him and to try to minimize some of the weaknesses. So I don't know what the national consensus is in terms of whether Brock Purdy should be classified as a franchise quarterback by now.
Yeah, that is a tricky one. I can see that both ways. It is hard to let go of a guy that you think has the potential to be your guy for a while. At the same time, the fact that he is their guy, I think would fight against the idea that you have to sign somebody because you're so afraid of not having anything else there. I mean, he was Mr. Irrelevant. He was the last pick in the draft, after they had taken Trey Lance, which did not work out for them. That failed fairly spectacularly. And they were able to make up for it by the fact that they took one late and were able to develop him. Now, do you want to count on that all the time? I don't think you do. I don't think you expect that a pick that late in the draft is going to lead to a quarterback that gets a second contract very often. But I also think these things with quarterbacks get a little tough because the price has gotten so expensive and there is no carve out. I mean, people have talked about this. Do you do a separate quarterback cap or something like that? At this point, that has not happened. And you get guys like this, or you get guys like, I think Jordan Love is probably in this boat a little bit with the Packers where they had to pay him and they're okay now because they have a young roster around him. But once they have to make some of those decisions, it's, well, if this guy is the 12th or 13th best quarterback in the league, do we want to be paying him this kind of money? I mean, this is, the Vikings ran into this with Kirk Cousins quite a bit too, and it, I think, becomes an even more complicated question as the quarterback costs go up to the degree that they have, and I don't think that's going to stop. So a lot of these dilemmas that you face with a quarterback like Purdy, I think, are just going to get more complicated.
Do you believe that Kevin O'Connell will be quite tickled to learn that yet another quarterback desperately wanted to find his way somehow to Minnesota to be coached by the quarterback whisperer based on a new book that is either just out or about to be released?
Well, I think he probably knew that already, or at least probably had reason to believe that. I mean, J.J. McCarthy said that after he got drafted, that all six of those quarterbacks, because they had all gotten to know each other and they'd crossed paths enough to compare notes, and J.J. McCarthy, I think, said in his press conference the day after the draft, all six of these guys wanted to be in Minnesota. They thought this was the best situation, probably both because of Kevin O'Connell and the offense, but also the personnel, the facilities, all of those kinds of things were very quarterback friendly. So there was a lot of that steam already. And I think the book and the fact that they were talking about how do we force our way to Minnesota is awfully interesting. That's going to become a very juicy subplot as we head into that Monday night matchup week one. It probably already has plenty of subplots with both of these quarterbacks coming out and facing each other. But yeah, it's interesting to see that because for so much of the Vikings history, this has not been an organization or a franchise that has defined itself by great quarterbacking. I mean, in quite a number of cases, they actually have this odd history of winning in spite of not having a franchise quarterback. I think they've had more veteran starters sign here and go to the playoffs in the first year with the Vikings than any other team in the NFL. I looked this up last year. It's your Jim McMahons, your Randall Cunninghams, Jeff Georges, obviously Sam Darnold became the latest, but they've been able to kind of patch it together. So this idea that it's becoming this incubator for quarterbacks is quite unusual in Vikings history. And it's obviously a good thing to be known for because we've seen it define this division for the last 30 years in the fact that the Vikings' biggest rival has been that team. So if you can take that mantle, it's not a bad thing to have to your name. Let's just say that.
Let's talk a little bit about the Vikings schedule here because I view it, a lot of times you could look at schedules and there's increments, there's periods of it where you think, well, this is meaty. And then if you can get past that, then maybe you got something going. And I view, the first 5 games include, first you start in Chicago. The Bears still have to prove they're legit, but it's, it's a Monday night opener and it's there. And then it also includes a home game against the Bengals, a team that can be formidable. But I almost look at that first stretch of 5 games as a stretch where the Vikings better get to at least 3-2 because when I look at then the next part, after the bye. Now we got the bye after the European trip, back-to-back games. We've got, if I'm reading it right, we got the Eagles at Chargers, at Detroit, Baltimore. Now Chicago here, you can say that should be a victory, but then at Green Bay, at Seattle, Washington here. And so I say to me, that is an extremely meaty part of the schedule, which means I think you kind of have to hit the ground running a little bit. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're 100% right on that. And that schedule after the bye, I believe the first 4 teams they play before the Bears combined for 52 wins last year. So it's that, and then it's another West Coast game on a Thursday night right after you play the Super Bowl chance at home and a team that likes to run the ball, a game that's going to be physical, and then it's Detroit on the road, and then you come back and you get Lamar Jackson. So there are a lot of challenges for the Vikings in that stretch, and people talk a lot about, well, every team is different every year, and how can you assume that it's going to be the same? I think it changes a little bit with teams of that level of pedigree of the Eagles and the Ravens, and I think the Lions are probably getting to that point too. When you have consistent quarterbacks, when you have offenses with identities and things that they know they do really well, at least as long as they're legal. We'll see if the thing that the Eagles do really well is going to be legal after next week when the owners meet in Egan. But there are, I think, a lot of consistency things that come with it when you have good quarterbacks, as a lot of these teams do, that mean even if the team is not 12 or 13 wins every year, they're going to be tough enough that you're going to have to play well to beat them. They're going to be able to have a good enough game to make it very difficult on you. So that level of quarterbacks, when you talk about Daniels towards the end of the season, and then the Lions on a short week on Christmas Day, I think all of those things are really tricky. I mean, the travel, I think the number of times where they are minus a day in terms of rest and recovery, I think that is a little more significant this year as well. We knew this was going to be a tougher schedule just by the teams that were on it, but I think the way it lays out adds another level of complexity to the whole.
763 guy asked a question I don't think you and I have gotten into since the draft. Why did they trade for Sam Howell versus drafting Shedeur Sanders? Do you have any inkling that the quarterback whisperer was at all fascinated with him, to the fact that they had a young quarterback that they want to be the guy, all but make it impossible for them to want to have that added challenge of another young quarterback? Or what do you think?
Well, I think the trick with Shedeur Sanders is you have to like him enough as a quarterback to say, we are going to take all this on. And you could talk about fifth-round pick. That's not as difficult to do it. It's not as much of a spotlight. I think in some ways it's actually worse, because you're going to have players saying, man, this is a lot of talk. This is a lot of distraction for a guy that was drafted in the fifth round. Why are we putting up with all of this when it's not the first-round pick? I think all of those things become a little more tricky when it is a guy that you don't have a lot of commitment to. There's at least not an organizational sort of mandate to play him and be behind him like there would be if he's a first-round pick. So I don't know exactly what they thought of him. I think a lot of the questions that people had about him in terms of how fast is he, how quickly does he process things, all of those kinds of questions, I think were in their evaluation as well. But I think a lot of it is when you look at a young quarterback that they have and a guy in Sam Howell who they had seen in the NFL and I think liked back in 2022 when they were scouting all these things, I'm sure they said, this is probably not worth the accoutrements that come with it, so to speak, if we're just going to take another young quarterback that we have to develop anyway.
Do we know, by the way, we're chatting with Ben Goessling, who covers the Vikings for the Star Tribune and joins us weekly, thanks to our good friends at Standard Heating and Air Conditioning. Do we know why the Vikings seem so willing to participate in this grand European experiment? Is it they just don't think it's that big a deal? They don't think it's going to be that, radical to be there 2 straight weeks? Or is it the business opportunities that are offered because apparently of the licensing advantage we have there? What do you make of that, the Vikings seemingly raising, I assume you kind of got to raise your hand or be willing to go along with this sort of thing. Why were we fine with it?
Well, I think Mike North, who runs a lot of the scheduling stuff for the league, got on, I think it was Ross Tucker's podcast today, and had a pretty interesting discussion on this very issue in terms of, was a team going to be willing to try this, and would the Vikings be up for it? He basically said that they talked about it because the Vikings were going to play both of these teams. They've played internationally quite a bit. They've got the marketing rights in London. He said Roger Goodell basically asked him, do you think they'd be interested in it? He thought Goodell thought the Vikings would be like, no, we're not interested in this. So I think it started with ownership saying we'd be open to discussing what this would look like, which comes from the fact that ownership, I think, is very interested in growing the brand over there. I think they have been pretty consistent about that for probably a decade now. If you remember back when the Metrodome was closing, the Vikings actually were in talks with the NFL to move a home game over to London 3 years in a row, which would have been the last year at the Metrodome and the 2 years at the University of Minnesota. They got one up by the Jaguars, who did a 4-game agreement with the NFL, but the Vikings have been out front on this and have said, we are good with the idea of playing internationally. We like being able to expose people around the world to what we have going. And then I think Kevin O'Connell probably is the next step with this. The fact that they will now have played their third and fourth international games in his 4 years as a coach after doing it only once with Mike Zimmer, I don't think that's an accident. I think he understands the branding. I mean, he certainly has been, kind of front and center, and has been a guy that understands the need to sell the game, to sell the Vikings when he's at podiums talking to international media. When I've seen him in that role, he seems very comfortable doing it. And I think they also feel like they can figure this out. I think their belief in Tyler Williams, their belief in their staff to make it work, I think they say, well, if we can trade a trip to Pittsburgh and Cleveland for our young quarterback for effectively a neutral site, if we can handle all the logistics of it, I think they say, yeah, we'll take that challenge, we'll take that trade, because we believe we could do it, especially in that second game where they will already be acclimated to the time zone and the Browns will not. So if you get through that first one, I'm sure they're saying this actually works out in our favor. So I think for a lot of reasons, they're open to doing it. And when the league is going whole hog like they are with international stuff, I think the Vikings saying yes to it is a big piece of why this came together, because the league wants to do it. They just need a team to get on board.
As you well know, NFL owners will meet in Eagan, I believe, Tuesday and Wednesday, spring meetings. So what will be the major pieces of business that the average Rube might be interested in?
Well, there are a couple of them. I think probably three. The tush push will get relitigated, rediscussed at this thing, because that got tabled at the owners' meetings in March. They said, let's come back to this in May. Let's come back to this at the meetings in Minnesota and say, are we going to keep this play legal or not? I think the playoff seeding is also going to be very interesting. There seems to be a little bit of momentum for that coming through, where playoff seeding would now change so that if you have a better record than a team that won its division, you would actually be at home in the first round. So the Vikings in that situation would have been, I think, the number 3 seed last year if that had been in place. So we'll see if that comes through. And then the NFL announced yesterday this resolution of trying to find a way to make it so that players can participate in flag football in the 2028 Olympics, which the NFLPA has said we're open to having the conversation, but we got to figure out what this looks like in training camp for player injuries, all that kind of stuff. But if that happens, I think there's going to be a lot of momentum to get players to Los Angeles in 2028, because the NFL sees it as another way to grow the game globally. I mean, Peter O'Reilly from the league talked about this yesterday, that flag football and the fact that it's becoming an Olympic sport is another way to get the rest of the world introduced to American football. And he sees that kind of going hand in hand with what the league is doing with these international games. So if that comes through, I think there'll be a lot of interest in the league. And I think there are players, probably Justin Jefferson among them, who are intrigued by the idea of playing for their country, possibly winning a gold medal. I think if it happens, it's going to be fascinating to watch those guys playing against, people that are not at their level in terms of football acumen and football athletic ability on an international stage. I'm hoping Ryan Kostecka, sports editor of the Star Tribune, if you're listening, sending your NFL writer to cover that in LA 2028 seems like a good investment.
Outstanding investment, for sure.
Especially if you can go cover track and you can double dip.
There you go.
I think it's a no-brainer.
Well, that was my question. I mean, how many other countries are going to be represented in flag football?
It's going to be really interesting to see, because I would imagine Germany gets a team together. There have been enough players from some of the European countries. There's enough interest in football in general. Maybe Mobo comes back to play in it. I don't know. If people remember Morris Boringer from the Vikings about 8 or 9 years ago. But, I would think France probably has a team. Places that the NFL has played, I think there will probably be enough people. I mean, NFL Europe is a bygone thing at this point, but some of those countries probably will have teams, I would think. I could see there are enough NFL players that come out of Africa that I would think maybe an African country or two can put a team together. Uganda, Nigeria, some of those countries that have had NFL players, maybe that becomes a thing. It's going to be really interesting to see what it looks like, because I think it could have a little bit of, people talk about the first round of the NCAA tournament where Duke is playing against a bunch of guys that are going to end up being accountants or, insurance salesmen in a couple of years, and they get beat by one of those teams. I don't think that'll happen. I mean, I think the dream team sort of effect will be part of this, but I would imagine the NFL looks at that too and says the 1992 Olympic basketball team had a major hand in growing the sport in Europe, and you have all these players that come over as a result of that. Why couldn't this be the same kind of thing if those types of players are on the international stage and people get into this as a result of it? I think a lot of those ambitions for the NFL are in play, and if everybody can figure out how to do it in terms of the logistics of it, I think it'll happen.
Jonathan from Bloomington has an interesting question. He wants to know if you might envision a Christmas Day where the defending world champion Timberwolves will be playing on national TV at the same time as the Vikings and Lions are on national TV, and would there be a story about how the TV ratings differ between the NBA and the NBA and the NFL?
That is a great point. I had not thought of that, but it's typically, the marquee game for the NBA is typically that late afternoon window on Christmas Day, is it not?
Correct. And we're the second game, right?
Yeah,
of the triple header.
Christmas for sure. Title or not. Doesn't matter. Be Christmas.
Well, that's true, actually. You're right. Even if they don't win the title.
It's certainly a possibility. Every fatalistic Minnesota sports fan is saying, hey, you guys are putting a cart before a horse here that's not ready to happen. But yeah, that's a great point. It is very possible that would happen, that they'd both be playing at the same time, if in fact it was that. And like Gargi says, maybe it's not even the Wolves winning and they're still put on Christmas Day. But yeah, that is very much a possibility that they're playing right on top of each other. It would be a fascinating ratings battle there. I think the Vikings would probably still win it handily, but the Vikings aren't going to be on network TV there either. They're going to be on Netflix. So maybe you do the picture-in-picture thing and figure out a multi-view setup of some type Christmas afternoon if that's the case.
Well, don't tell Johnny Athletic that. He's probably fight with you about the ratings, even though I think he deep down understands that football is always king. Let me finish by calling back to a subject we got into at the start of the show and get your viewpoint on it. I raised the question of what if we took the temperature in 2025 on how the public at large and even the politicians in St. Paul feel about helping out billionaire owners. Whether obviously the Vikings don't need a new stadium, but they want some. I think there's some work that is wanted that allegedly needs to be done. The X and around there, the Wild, they want a bunch of projects to renovate that building and maybe even try to build some infrastructure around there from a business standpoint, etc. So where are we? And the Wolves want a new arena, although I think so far A-Rod has said, well, we would try to build it privately. Are we at a point now where there's no appetite any longer to make major deals with owners in this town? Are the Vikings still an exception, or what's the appetite, let's say, compared to maybe 5, 10, 15 years ago?
Yeah, I think the appetite is always a function of how real is the threat. Is it possible that the team would move, I think is usually part of the conversation, because obviously the Vikings, it was a struggle for more than a decade, spanned two ownership groups to get a stadium built. And I think that's part of the reason Red McCombs wanted to sell the team, is it didn't seem like it was going to happen. And the Wilfs had to be awfully patient as well. They never really outwardly threatened to move the team, but everybody understood that if it didn't pass, Los Angeles was a clear and present threat to take the team. So they didn't really have to say it because everybody knew it.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
I think some of it is when you have markets that are filled and markets that are saturated in some sense, how much can a team move? How much of a threat is there really to get something done? I think that's always a question. Are there markets that would take a team that is a valid place to put the team? I think that's always the question there. And maybe as things get bigger internationally, that leads to some markets possibly being options there as well. So, I think for the Vikings, obviously, they have a lease at US Bank Stadium that goes, I think, through 2045. So they are going to want some of those improvements. And there's probably an argument they'll make of this is good for the public in terms of events. And, maybe you get another Final Four at some point here and all of those kinds of things. But yeah, it does feel a little bit to me like it's shifted, that the value of these teams has gotten so exorbitant that when you're talking $1 billion plus just to get in probably to almost any professional sports team at this point in terms of owning it, I think there's a lot of people that say, well, this is such a drastic amount of money that somebody that's doing this has to have enough money to probably finance a stadium or a stadium improvement project too. So it does seem like it's gotten a little more difficult. I feel like the Bears have had trouble trying to get things done. Right. The Browns certainly have had trouble. There's a lot more headwinds here, I think, and probably just as we move into a recession or economic headwinds in general, I think there's probably going to be a lot of those questions as well. So it does seem a little tougher at the moment than maybe it was 10 years ago.
I'm being taken to the woodshed by Mike in New Richmond. Dan, you have to pay attention to the flag football community. There are teams all over the world. And by the way, he writes, I wouldn't be so sure that a U.S. team made up of professional NFL players would be a shoo-in to win a gold. Tackling versus grabbing a flag are two totally different skills. Is there a massive worldwide flag football community that I just haven't been paying attention to?
I mean, there is a flag football community. I think it's bigger than we probably realize, but I don't know. I still have a hard time believing that. I mean, grabbing a flag is one thing, yes, but I think creating space, creating leverage, quarterbacks being able to put the ball into tight windows and throw on time, throw into places where defenders can't really do much about it, I think is probably still a differentiating factor, and I have a hard time believing that the rest of the world will be able to match those things, but maybe I'll be surprised by that. It's what makes it a fascinating conversation is that you are changing the game in the sense of it's not tackle football, it's flag football. So how much does that affect it? I think is an open question. I tend to think that the U.S. talent pool and experience with the game will still probably bring us through, but if the U.S. were to go down in a sport that it invented, it would be a awfully big story. So, once again, if the Star Tribune is covering that with Vikings players in there, I think it's a wise investment in the coverage.
Did I see the two JJs courtside next to each other at the Wolves game? Honestly, every time I see JJ McCarthy out of uniform, I feel like he looks younger. He looked like he's 13 years old. It's unbelievable. He's the youngest looking quarterback in history.
He does have a bit of a baby face. Yes. I mean, he's spending his rookie bonus well, I guess, in terms of getting seats for those Wolves games. Yeah, him and both the JJs were there. Yeah. I imagine we will continue to see them. And probably Kevin O'Connell as well during the Western Conference Finals. I think Quashi's been there. I think B-Flow has been there. It'll be the place to be, especially now players are going to be back for OTAs. I would imagine the Timberwolves games will be
very
a place
popular
to see and be seen for Vikings players coming up.
No question. Great stuff as always, my friend. Have a great weekend, and we will chat next week, if not sooner. Thanks, Ben.
All right. Sounds great. Thanks, Dan.
Appreciate you. Ben Goessling, brought to you by Standard Heating and Air Conditioning. I had hoped for a 520 sports fix, but I went long with Ben. So we'll pause and prepare for the regular 5:30 visit with Lavelle Neal III. And if Guardsy's got a couple of headlines he wants to get to before we introduce Lavelle, or maybe even with Lavelle, he is free to do that as well.
Hey, friend, I know how this feels. Waking up exhausted after multiple trips to the bathroom and feeling embarrassed by sudden leaks. I used to be constantly on edge, searching for a restroom whenever I was out. Then I discovered Better Woman. I was skeptical at first, but 2 months in, everything changed. I experienced improved bladder control. No more heart-stopping moments when I laugh or sneeze. Less urge to go. Deeper and more restful sleep. I finally felt like myself again. Confident and in control. Better Woman is natural, effective, clinically tested, and trusted by women for over 25 years. Ready to take back your control? Head over to BeBetterNow.com to order your supply today. That's BeBetterNow.com. These statements have not been evaluated by the FDA. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. Use as directed. Individual results may vary.
Well, maybe it's really not crazy to commence our conversation with Lavelle Neal III by talking baseball. It doesn't seem as outlandish and wasteful based on the current condition of the much maligned Minnesota Twins. Lavelle joins us thanks to our good friends at Allery's Bar and Barbecue in downtown St. Paul. They would have provided great parking for Minnesota Wild postseason hockey, but of course, the postseason is over. Lavelle, do you...
Frost games. Park there for
Frost games. Good
Take
point.
The shuttle.
Very good point, yeah.
Go watch Taylor Heisey.
What do you think, Lavelle?
And they also do Saints games, which is nearby, and they also do Loons games.
Would you do me a favor? Do you have the Sunday column written yet?
Yes.
Damn it. All right. Well, then it's too late, I guess.
An apology? What am I supposed to apologize for now?
No. Can you write an extra one declaring Minnesota as the new state of basketball? just to get the hockey community going, because they were hot after me last night.
I know. It is a state of hockey, but this is a great basketball area. I've seen it on the high school level. I've read about it on the AAU summer level. The Gophers have been down, yes, but when the Wolves started winning a few years ago, it was safe to come out, and you're seeing I just watched a replay of someone's podcast, and they had a former NBA coach on. They were asking him about the loudest stadiums in the league, and the guy actually mentioned that Minnesota is underrated for how loud that stadium could get. It's up into levels like Indiana when they used to play the Market Square Arena and places like that. So Wolves fans bring it, and they're showing up in force now. So, yes, and the Lynx are expected to win the WNBA title now. So hopefully the commissioner will dress up his IDS Center for the final series and present them the trophy at the end of the year. So they get ready to start playing against Dallas here at home next week. So, yeah, I mean, there's room. You could be a state of more than one thing, and there's definitely room for basketball. That could be a column.
It could be a lot of fun. Yeah, because I think what I'm trying to encourage is the notion that the state of whatever shouldn't just be about how popular it is or how deep it is at various levels. It should be about winning. It should be about winning. Somewhere there's got to be a winning component that includes, at some point, perish the thought, a little bit of postseason success. That said, well, go ahead.
I was going to say, and, the hockey fans have to understand where they're at right now. The squad's not getting it done.
No.
Even the Chargers, when they released the Vikings, their schedule on Minecraft, they actually had a Wild banner about the Vikings game, pointing out that the Wild are like a conference quarterfinalist for 8 times in the last 10 years.
Conference quarterfinal runner-up.
Runner-up. That's right. Yes.
That's the beauty of the bid.
More savage than you remembered.
That's as vicious as one team can be about another, even in an era where we're seeing teams get braver through their social media channels of doing so.
Absolutely. So, I mean, be careful what you speak about because they could boomerang back on you.
All right, so
hockey fans.
Let's get a little Twins in here. We're going to have to get an extra break to get caught up, but Twins have, I think it's the 5th longest winning streak already in team history. Everything's going great, other than I guess we got 2 main players. Shouldn't laugh. Concussion protocol. I think they're both going to be okay. But let's start before
Correa got moved to the concussion list.
Correa did not
like 2 minutes ago.
Okay,
they announced it,
which means
not Buxton. Buxton he's not playing tonight, but he's not on the concussion list.
He is not. Okay, fair enough. All right, so putting that story aside a little bit. How real is this surge? I mean, is it sustainable? Is it a nice little blip that, in the ups and downs of a baseball season against mainly bad teams? Not all bad teams, but not very good teams. How are Twins fans supposed to process this winning streak?
Well, they should be excited. The one thing here is that when you have a bad pitching staff and a good offense, it is very hard to win because you have to out-hit your pitching on a nightly basis. And even if that happens, they can blow leads. I was just looking at the list here. I can't remember. There's a team that's already lost 15 games in which they've led in, But when you have a strong pitching staff and you're trying to get your offense together and you play a little bit of defense, you could win that way. It's been proven in this league for years, and that's what's happening now. It wasn't that way at the beginning of the year because offense was just dreadful, just god-awful offense. Failure to hit with runners in scoring position. Plus, there were goofy errors, pitchers forgetting PFPs and throwing wildly to first. They've cleaned some things up defensively. They've been more productive offensively. with contributions from crazy people like Deshaun Kiersey coming up with game-winning hits, and Harrison Bader batting, I think, over 400 over the last 15 games. Buxton finally playing like at an all-star level, and despite Correa hitting lower than my blood alcohol content on a Saturday night, they've been able to score some runs and have some success here. Can they continue to play at this ridiculous, win 11 out of 12, 11 out of 15? I'm not going to say that, but they have put themselves in a position where if they just can win, start stacking more series wins together and not worrying about sweeping everybody, they can be a factor here. They're in a tough division. I think Detroit's for real. They've got a lot of guys who are stepping up. Riley Green's a great offensive player. This McKinstry guy has been very good for them. Spencer Torkelson has been the hitting prospect they thought he was going to be when they drafted him. And plus, they've got strong pitching led by Tariq Skubal. The Cleveland Guardians are doing well. And Bobby Witt's Kansas City Royals, who will be there next weekend, are playing well as well. But the Twins, with that pitching staff, and they could just keep the offense functional, they're going to win games, and they're going to be a factor here.
Let's get a pause in here. I got a lot more ground to cover with you, including the subject of your Sunday column, your reaction to the Wolves as they await game number 7 between Oklahoma City and Denver, and a lot more with Lavelle. If you have questions or comments for him, Bradshaw and Bryant KFAN text line is available to you at 646.
Hey, friend. I know how it feels, waking up exhausted after multiple trips to the bathroom and feeling embarrassed by sudden leaks. I used to be constantly on edge, searching for a restroom whenever I was out. Then I discovered Better Woman. I was skeptical at first, but 2 months in, everything changed. I experienced improved bladder control, no more heart-stopping moments when I laugh or sneeze, less urge to go, deeper and more restful sleep. I finally felt like myself again, confident and in control. Better Woman is natural, effective, and trusted by women for over 25 years. Ready to take back your control? Head over to BeBetterNow.com to order your supply today. That's BeBetterNow.com. These statements have not been evaluated by the FDA. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. Use as directed. Individual results may vary.
686. Lavelle Neal III, Part 2. If you are running, coaching, playing for the Minnesota Timberwolves, who do you want to play in the Western Conference Finals?
Well, I mean, they are the Nuggets daddies over the last few years, right? So I would probably go there, although Jokic, my goodness, I know Shai Gilgeous-Alexander may win the MVP, but Jokic is the best player in the league. It's just the thing he does, the touch he has around the basket, his offensive acumen, it's just amazing for them to watch. When Murray's hitting three-pointers, they're a very dangerous team. There was a stretch there in the fourth quarter where I thought they're going to win this game, and the Wolves are going to hook the Nuggets, and it's going to be great. OKC, one of the Wolves' signature wins of the year was when they trailed by 25 at Oklahoma City. And they came back and they outscored the Thunder 41-19 in the fourth quarter, forced overtime, and then won in overtime. And that was a point where they were starting to get their bleed together as far as Julius Randle finding his role in the offense and other players trusting each other and moving forward. So, if you want me to pick one of those teams, I will say Denver, just based on recent results.
As you know, the Celtics face elimination tonight, and then if they win, there'd be a Game 7 in Boston. If we assume Boston's not going to come back as the defending world champions, and knowing that they've lost also their best player, do you buy the notion that the Timberwolves have as good a chance as anybody to, as crazy as it is to say out loud, win the NBA title? Lavelle?
Hello?
Lavelle?
Hello?
Oh, it's just so good. It's just a gift that keeps on giving. I don't even know what to say. I'm sorry I didn't hold it together there, but it's just... It's not just the technical issue. It's the panicky, hello? Is anybody out there? Hello? Do we think we have him back, Guardsy? I don't know what happened there. We obviously could
nothing
still
happened.
I hear him. He hit the mute button, didn't he?
And then it's going to voicemail now when I call him, so give me a minute or two. Yeah, the panic is the best.
That's the best. That's why I almost wanted him to say it a couple more times. That's why I didn't even respond, because I want him to say hello again. It's that extremely frightened hello. Like, am I the last person left? Am I the last person standing? Is it me and nobody else? Not exactly sure, but Guardsy's negotiating with him now to see if we can indeed get him back on the line. And now I don't even remember what my long-winded bloviating question. Well, actually, I do remember my long-winded bloviating question. I don't know how much of it he heard. Did you hear my question?
The last thing I heard you say was, "Do you buy?"
And then it went. Well, you must have hit mute again, because we could hear you fine. We could hear you in your panicky hello.
I looked at my phone and the mute was not pressed. Yes. I don't know what happened.
Conspiracy. All right. So if the Celtics are out, right, and they're not yet, but let's say they are, and we do know their best player is out for the playoffs. Do you buy the notion that, as insane as it sounds, especially in this town, that the Minnesota Timberwolves have as much of a chance to win, to actually hoist the Lombardi Trophy, as any of the other remaining teams?
Well, didn't your guy Sam Mitchell come on air and say that he thinks the Wolves are the best of the remaining teams in the postseason? He
did. Now that doesn't mean it's the only opinion you can have. You can say, well, he's getting a little ahead of himself. He's getting too excited. It's his allegiance to the old team. Now, he's been right this year, although he also said the Wolves were going to beat Dallas last year, which it didn't work out that way. So I'm asking you where you are on that particular issue.
Oh, I think they definitely have a chance. And the way they're playing, I know it stretches during the Golden State series. It looked ugly. Golden State was able to muck some things up with the Wolves offense, but the Wolves adjusted and adapted to what they needed to do to win games. I mean, you look at all the turnovers they committed in the last game against Golden State. They still had 36 assists. They were moving the ball quickly out around the zone. They were finding lanes. They were getting guys open. When they're making that extra pass, they're a very, very hard team to stop. A year ago, you were worried because Jay McDaniels' offense hadn't flourished yet. So basically, you had like two or three guys who you could trust to score with Rudy and Jayden. Jayden can score now. I think that adds more problems through their attack. Mike Conley, you can get most of them out of stretches, 28 minutes a game. He can hit an occasional three. He can keep things settled down on the floor. And then you got a guy, Dante DiVincenzo, who's a dog, who can come in when Conley needs to leave, or the other teams are picking on him on the other end of the court with bigger players. And he can stem the tide. I just think there's a lot of yin and yang with this offense, being able to flow, adapt, change shapes, change approaches to how they're scored, to the point where they're hard for teams to stop scoring. And even like I said, the last game against Golden State, Ant didn't take a shot until like 6 minutes left in the first quarter, and they were leading.
Yeah,
he was dishing out assists, finding teammates. So they've got that in them. They know they've got it in them. They've been successful that way, and I think they're hard out the rest of the way. Whoever they play in the Western Conference Finals is about to find that out. And I don't think there's a monster team on the other side of the bracket that is a sure thing against them. So yes, I think the Wolves could possibly do something that we didn't think they could do a few months ago, and that is get a trophy. I'm not predicting an NBA title
yet,
but
it.
In terms of capability, they definitely have it.
I agree 100%. Monday night, September 8, 2025. Soldier Field, Chicago, Illinois, Vikings, Bears. Who wins and why?
Wow, that's a long time. That's a Paul Allen-esque question, too. Who wins and why? I would like to argue that the Bears could win that game because the coaching staff has been settled down now with the exodus of Mike Eberflus. Ben Johnson's coming in with a better vision, better plan. I was just reading the story, Tyson Bagent, and was just profusely talking about all the good things that Johnson's doing in terms of coaching hard. Everything connects. Everything makes sense. He makes you feel like you have a shot. He already sees jumps in Caleb Williams from year one to year two. They've addressed the offensive line. I wish they'd gotten more of an impact running back, but you can't get everything you want, I guess. But and I also can't forget that the last time the Vikings visited Soldier Field, the Bears came back in the fourth quarter and did force overtime. And Caleb Williams threw for 340 yards against that Brian Flores defense. So, yes, I think the Bears could win September 8th. And, yes, I will be there. It's already been determined I will be cogumizing off that game at Soldier Field on Monday night.
All right, so how embarrassed were you to find out that Caleb, the aforementioned Caleb Williams, desperately wanted to find a way to get himself sent, as unrealistic as it ultimately was going to be, the Minnesota Vikings to be coached by the quarterback whisperer, KOC, wanted no part of being abused by the coaches, the inept offensive coaches for the Monsters of the Midway?
I don't know if it was embarrassed. It just kind of drove home a lot of points. It just crystallized everything that was going on with Chicago the last 2 years, actually. First of all, parents could be hilarious when it comes to their kids in sports. And it sounds like their father was ready to batten down the hatches and go to war and try to get Caleb moved to another city like the Mannings did or whatever. But Caleb's quote about I didn't want to nuke Chicago was pretty impressive there. So Dan, it just shows how bad the situation was the last 2 years. 2 years ago, the Bears had to dismiss two assistant coaches during the season that in situations that involved the HR department. They bring in Shane Waldron, who apparently is not assistant coaching caliber in the NFL, and Caleb saw that. And Matt Eberflus and his coaching malpractice, they committed during games 3-4 times during the regular season, was evident as well. So, yeah, Caleb came into a bad situation. The Bears should have moved on from Eberflus before the 2024 season, but if we had done that, we probably would not be in a position to get Ben Johnson. So, I don't know what they got. It just shows that how much of a crap show it's been in Chicago the last couple of years, man. Did you see the San Diego Chargers schedule release through Minecraft?
Yes, we talked about it. In fact, you talking about the Chiefs shot on the Wild?
So, if the Vikings use Minecraft to release their schedule, they could have just replaced the Raiders with the Bears. They had them running into the crappy shack with the flies, the picture of the clown show, and they getting blown up.
It's a good point.
It's been like that the last couple of years.
What's the Sunday column?
I'm writing about Pete Rose and now having a little bit of a path to possibly getting into the Hall of Fame. Personally, I don't think he's going to get in, but here's a chance here. And I maintain, and I pointed this out in the column, that he should have had a chance to be voted on by the Baseball Writers Association of America.
Back in the day.
We could have had this case taken care of once and for all. So I'm kind of glad that this is the potential for this to happen is finally there. And I think it stinks that all this is now being addressed months after he passed away. He should still be smelling the roses to at least experience this process.
It's a good subject. Garzi and I have gotten into it. We don't have time to get into too much detail on it. I think the biggest issue I've had throughout the Rose saga is, if you listen, I think The Athletic, they quoted about, I think, a dozen Hall of Famers from several different eras about whether they would vote for him. And it was kind of split, because I don't think it's a slam dunk that this committee, again, it depends on who's on the committee, is going to get him in. And I don't even think they meet again till December of 2027, which means the earliest would be 28, right? The summer of 28 that he could be inducted posthumously. But that they point out what I pointed out, that the irony of this is that other people on Rose's behalf have been far more sincere and committed to trying to find the pathway to get him in than Pete Rose himself. That there have been several opportunities where Rose could have done the mea culpa. He was supposed to do one mea culpa and then basically betrayed the commissioner on what he ultimately was willing to say, with other players helping him, trying to intercede on his behalf. And I think that's part of the reason I haven't been all that sympathetic to the Rose cause, is because he has been so often his own worst enemy. Other people have worked harder for him than he's worked for himself.
Oh, yeah, I totally agree, Dan. I think if he had just admitted to what he did and agreed to do what Jim Cobb pointed it out in the athletic story.
That's right.
He could have admitted his guilt. He could have agreed to do some sort of counseling and have begun the process to where he could apologize and maybe counsel younger players about the dangers of gambling.
And it would have been
done.
done.
A case to make it easier for him to get back in the fold here. But he continued to deny. And then he told Bud Selig in a private conversation in 2000 that he did bet on baseball, and then he did it publicly in 04 only because he had a book coming out.
Right.
And for him, it was always about making money without seeing the big picture, and that will be part of the discussion. You know, I was on the Veterans Committee that elected Fred McGriffin, so I know what the thinking is. And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, this isn't going to be a writer thing, because of that 16-person committee, only 3 were writers. Me, myself, Susan Slusser, and Steve Hurt. The rest were former current Hall of Famers and league executives. So it's this panel, and it's proven to be tougher, especially in the cases of Roger Clemens and Barry Bonds, who are trying to get into the Hall through that process. And that's my thing with this, is that if somehow Pete is allowed to get in the Hall of Fame, then I'm going to throw my hands up and say, you might as well let Bonds and Clemens in, because this morals clause or this character clause that the Hall of Fame established in 1945 doesn't mean anything. So I kind of want this to happen. I want this to be put out there so we can figure out what criteria should be determining criteria to elect someone to the Hall of Fame.
Does this committee then revolve? Does it change constantly who the voters are?
Yes, it's selected by the Hall of Fame. They reach out to possible. They offer the opportunity to be part of the committee. So. So I mean, there is a small chance that I will be asked to be on that committee. Gotcha. I'm not sure. It's not guaranteed. But that is something that is very possible.
Now, is there a situation where any individuals might have veto power? For example, would Pedro Martinez have veto power over your being returned to the committee?
I don't know, but that would be interesting, because in theory, Pedro could be asked to be part of the Veterans Era Committee.
Oh, that'd be sizzling.
It could be a situation where we're in the same room together, and that would be quality entertainment on the side.
That would be outstanding. You kidding me? We'd have to get a tape recorder in that room. That'd be great.
Well, we're not allowed to discuss how the conversations went.
Well,
we're not allowed to discuss the process. All I can say is that if you just look at the results of the last committee era vote, Fred McGriff was voted in unanimously, and Bonds and Clemens didn't even get 4 votes. So that gives you an idea of what these committees are how they deliberate.
Hey, by the way, is Clemens' kid, is he this good? Or I mean, is he going to be? No. Is he a player, or are we just seeing him get some, hit a nice stretch?
He's having a couple of nice moments. Yeah. I mean, there's a reason why he was available. I think he's just okay defensively. Mm-hmm. I mean, he threw that runner out at third base, which was great yesterday.
Yeah,
but it happened because he ran too close to the wall, and the carom of the double went past him. He had to race the ball down and throw to third. And I don't think he's hitting 200, but he's had a couple big swings.
Yeah, he has.
And they have meant something. So it's a nice, cute little story. But in the end, I think if the Twins are fully healthy, he'll be DFA'd.
Thank you, Lavelle. We'll read you Sunday and talk next week. Thanks again.
Thanks for having me, man.
Lavelle Neal III with only one phone blip that, quite frankly, added, I think, largely to the entertainment.
Men, if you're ready to reclaim your edge, listen up. I used to be held back by constant bathroom trips with multiple wake-ups during my sleep and looking for restrooms whenever I was out. Then I discovered Better Man. After just 2 months, I started experiencing fewer trips to the bathroom, less urge to go, and I even slept through some nights. I feel a noticeable boost in my overall well-being, even sexual stamina. It gives me the freedom and confidence to live life on my terms. Better Man is clinically tested and trusted by thousands of men over 25 years. Ready to take back control? Go to BeBetterNow.com to order your supply today. That's BeBetterNow.com. These statements have not been evaluated by the FDA. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. Use as directed. Individual results may vary.
Entertainment value.
Hello? Hello? Hello?
Oh, it's too good.
Hello?
People think we choreograph this stuff. We're not that clever.
I got a text from someone that said this can't be real.
And it was.
I said it's real.
Hello?
It's 100% real. That's the beauty of it. That's what
That's
what
great.
makes Lavelle Bingo so, shall we say, compelling.
Hello?
Maury Amsterdam guy writes, Lavelle said hello like he was home alone and heard 3 a.m. footsteps in his condo.
Hello?
Just about
Hello?
right. By the way, your Minnesota Lynx open their regular season tonight right here on the Fan.
Right after us.
Right after we wrap up. And we're taking on
The Dallas
the
Wings.
local hero.
Paige
Becker's season debut. This is a road game for us, correct? This is in Dallas, Texas.
It is.
We are 5.5-point favorites tonight.
Oh.
In our home opener, I think, is Wednesday night, is it not?
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes. Also against Dallas, I believe.
I think you're right. That's exactly it. So you'd think, well, the Lynx draw well, but you'd think the Becker's part of it would add to the equation to a certain extent. And I have not watched any of Becker's with her new team, so I'm very curious to see how quickly obviously she's starting. They got like one other star, do they not? One other player, if you want to call Becker's. Yeah.
Agumbawale.
That's exactly
Enrique.
correct. I think there's every reason to believe she's going to be a superstar in the league. I really do. The question is how quickly, what she's got around her. I don't know how much she's going to be asked to do. She's a different kind of player, obviously, than Caitlin Clark. And then I think the Fever, they make their debut tomorrow against Chicago, I believe. Is it a WNBA doubleheader tomorrow on ABC? I think it's at least Clark. The Fever game is on national TV. I think they might have 2 games. We're not a part of either one of them. But that's okay. We're used to that, and that's not a big deal.
I'm fine with it.
It's not, I don't think anything that we have to.
I want the team to have the edge. I think they live well with the edge. We know Cheryl lives well with the edge. You got to have the edge.
I think the Celtics are going to win tonight. Let me back up. I'll do the equivocating on it. If Jaylen Brown plays the way he played last game, and he kind of played, because I think the word was, well, with his partner out, the number one scorer on the team, Tatum, the Knicks assumed Brown was going to try to be the 35-point guy. Instead, he was distributor guy.
Yeah, the ball was not sticky.
He was tremendous. And short term, there is some truth to the fact that when your star who's got the ball in his hands a lot is out, the ball is no longer as sticky. And Brown seemed to contribute to that by saying, I'm going to play point guard or point forward. He's kind of a combination guard forward wing. And he orchestrated. And his defense was tremendous. So, look, the Celtics have several people who can score. And certainly if they're hot on threes, they can win the game. And, then it gets really interesting if it goes back to Boston for Game 7, which I think would be Monday night. Meanwhile, I'm going to take Denver over Okie City.
Are you really?
On Sunday,
in Oklahoma
yes.
City?
Yes. Now,
wow.
Here's what I'm counting on, that somebody else will hit some shots beyond Joker.
Who's the guy I've never heard of that was hitting shots last night?
They signed him like 3 days ago.
Who is that guy?
I don't know, but he was brilliant.
Even he looked like, can you believe this?
But again, that was at home. The old question is, does that play travel to the road? I don't know. That's the fair question. But I don't like the way Oklahoma City's offense looks. I still don't. I don't like, they're not getting great shooting. And I have a hunch it could be Joker might do 47 points, 22 rebounds, and 12 assists.
Julian Strouder is who I'm thinking about.
That's the guy that you're thinking of.
3 of 4 from 3.
Who's the Celtics big man who looked like Bill Russell? In terms of blocked shots. Look him up because I have to find him out. Otherwise, I'll find it here briefly. I just retweeted
He had like 7 blocks, didn't he?
He was ridiculous. Yes, he was absolutely unbelievable. In fact, I just retweeted. I'd have no idea the context of this.
Luke Cornett.
I retweeted a tweet from a Celtics source where he is in front of a bunch of school kids singing "Girls Just Want to Have Fun." Why he's doing that, I don't know.
Because why wouldn't you?
But why wouldn't you? Cornett looked like Bill Russell, blocking shots, scoring, doing everything. And it did strike me that the Celtics were the ball was moving. They were getting up court quickly. They were not settling. Well, I shouldn't say they hit a lot of threes, but it didn't feel like they were being forced. I think the Knicks got to be tight here, man. I just have a weird hunch.
Well, they know. I mean, they know
that they have to win this one. Yeah,
because you don't want to have to go back to Boston for Game 7.
I don't think so.
Where again, the pressure's going to be all on you. It's not going to be on Boston, right? Boston has no pressure. Their best player's out. I know they want to win a title, but Jason Tatum's out.
That's it.
They're playing with house money. Like they can play fatly, loose and free.
He apparently, by the way, did you see? He apparently had his surgery like 3 minutes after he was in the locker room.
He was ready. Yeah.
And because apparently there is something to. The quicker you do that kind of surgery, the better. And I'm guessing that he got the best of the best. In fact, I think they used the guy who did Durant's Achilles.
Okay.
But they're already talking about him that he might come back in like 6 months, 7 months. Part of it, he's a supreme. He's got no fat on his body. The guy's in great shape, but we'll have to see. All right, let's come back, wrap up the show. Remind you, as I mentioned again, what's coming up next and some highlights as we prepare for the.
Men, if you're ready to reclaim your edge, listen up. I used to be held back by constant bathroom trips with multiple wake-ups during my sleep and looking for restrooms whenever I was out. Then I discovered Better Man. After just 2 months, I started experiencing fewer trips to the bathroom, less urge to go, and I even slept through some nights. I feel a noticeable boost in my overall well-being, even sexual stamina. It gives me the freedom and confidence to live life on my terms. Better Man is clinically tested and trusted by thousands of men over 25 years. Ready to take back control? Go to BeBetterNow.com to order your supply today. That's BeBetterNow.com. These statements have not been evaluated by the FDA. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. Use as directed. Individual results may vary.
For the weekend as well.
Show Wrap is presented by American Pressure, commercial-grade pressure washers since 1975.
It's the bumper-to-bumper Show Wrap.
Enough said tonight, 7:30 on Fox 9 Plus and at 10:30 on Fox 9 after professional football on Fox 9, correct? Do we know the matchup this evening?
I don't.
No, that's embarrassing.
I never looked.
Yeah.
UFL. Ask Pierre Nugent. He's got money on the game.
Does he actually bet on...
Yes.
What's the name of that league?
UFL, I think.
UFL football?
Yeah. Don't ask me what it stands for.
That's frightening.
Is it United? Oh, it's frightening.
That's frightening. Does he know that that's scary? So he's aware of it. He just can't help himself.
He's well aware of his degenerateness.
All right. By the way, tonight, no fan on Demand on the air because we're going directly to the Minnesota Lynx season opener. Yeah, tonight on the Flamethrower, the 100.3, 100,000-watt FM juggernaut, not to mention the iHeartRadio app as well. The Minnesota Lynx season opener. The team favored by fellow WNBA general managers to be the favorite to win the title. The Lynx taking on Paige Beckers and the Dallas Wings. All the coverage beginning tonight on The Fan.
By the way,
at 6:25 or 6:30.
Is it possible that we need a new arena, not just to make money for A-Rod and Lori, but with the Wolves and now the Lynx again, are we going to run out of room in the rafters?
I didn't even think of that.
We never had to plan for banners.
This had never been an issue before.
Never. After attendance banners and Flip's banner and Malik Sealy's banner.
We might have to rearrange some things up there.
We're going to have to move some things around.
I hadn't thought of that.
In the state of basketball.
It's a great idea. It's a great point. Hadn't even occurred to me, but it is something. That's the beauty of this new era in which we seem to be. I'm back, I think, for Sunday sermons at 9 o'clock. I haven't asked Alan Horton yet, but we got to have him on. It's now become tradition. So I'm guessing we'll talk to Alan Horton on Sunday, I hope, and he'll help us preview Game 7, right? Denver versus Okie City with the Wolves waiting to take on the winner. He's always got some good stats to throw our way as well, so we'll try to include him in the mix. Maybe a little Russo? Is there any room in the state of basketball for a little bit of hockey talk on Sunday morning? It's possible. Might throw him a bone. It's hard to say. We'll take it under advisement.
Good luck.
Enjoy the weekend. Thank you to our guest lineup today. Great stuff from Mike Conley. If you missed it, that'll be podcastable. He joined at 3:30. Ben Goessling at 5, and the one and only Lavelle.
Hello?
Joined at 5:30. He was at his best. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Enjoy the weekend, and I will talk to you Sunday morning at 9.
Men, if you're ready to reclaim your edge, listen up. I used to be held back by constant bathroom trips, with multiple wake-ups during my sleep and looking for restrooms whenever I was out. Then I discovered Better Man. After just 2 months, I started experiencing fewer trips to the bathroom, less urge to go, and I even slept through some nights. I feel a noticeable boost in my overall well-being, even sexual stamina. It gives me the freedom and confidence to live life on my terms. Better Man is clinically tested and trusted by thousands of men over 25 years. Ready to take back control? Go to BeBetterNow.com to order your supply today. That's BeBetterNow.com. These statements have not been evaluated by the FDA. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. Use as directed. Individual results may vary.